They say every empire begins with a whisper. Before the roar of legions, before marble towers and golden eagles, there was only silence and the slow heartbeat of a river. The Tiber flowed quietly through the hills, carrying stories no one had written yet. On its muddy banks stood a scattering of huts, smoke rising through the morning fog. No one looking at that scene would have believed the world's greatest empire would be born here. Yet destiny rarely announces itself. It hides in dirt, in hunger, in the stubborn will of people who refuse to vanish. Those first Romans were not noblemen. They were wanderers and shepherds, fugitives and outcasts. The myths tell us that two brothers, Romulus and Remus, suckled by a wolf, built this place. The historians will argue whether that's true, but myth often tells a deeper truth than fact. The story of Rome began with blood. Brother against brother, love against power. Romulus killed Remus and named the city after himself. It was a warning written in its birth. Greatness would never come without a price. At first, Rome was small, barely a dot among stronger neighbors. The Etruscans, the Sabines, the Latins. But there was something strange about the Romans. They were hard people, suspicious, restless. They never seemed satisfied with what they had. When their crops failed, they didn't pray for mercy. They built irrigation channels. When they were attacked, they didn't beg for peace. They learned to fight back better next time. They built walls not for pride, but for survival. And slowly, the village began to change. The huts became houses, the dirt paths turned into roads. They built forums to talk, temples to argue with the gods, and markets where ideas traded as much as grain. What united them wasn't wealth or language, it was discipline. The belief that order mattered more than comfort, that a man's word was as binding as iron, that laws once written should outlive the men who wrote them. Rome's neighbors thought the city was strange, too strict, too organized, too ambitious for its size. But ambition was the one resource Rome never lacked. Even when they were poor, they acted as if destiny owed them something. They built as if eternity was watching. They fought not just for victory, but for recognition. Every battle, every brick was a message to the world. Remember us. And the world did. Their first real test came with the Etruscans. Stronger, richer, more advanced. The Etruscans ruled Rome for a while, and under them the city learned. Rome borrowed their engineering, their symbols, their sense of grandeur, and then it rebelled. When the last Etruscan king was driven out, Rome swore it would never bow to a single ruler again. Thus was born the Republic, a promise that power would belong to many, not one. But freedom, like empire, is never pure. The Republic was built on tension, between rich and poor, between senators and soldiers, between ideals and hunger. Every vote in the Senate echoed with ambition. Every law carried a shadow of self-interest. Yet somehow, through that constant struggle, Rome grew stronger. The arguments were the furnace in which its identity was forged. When you look at early Rome, you see a contradiction. A people who dreamed of order but thrived in chaos. Their enemies saw instability. The Romans saw adaptability. Every defeat became a lesson. When a Roman army was crushed, they rebuilt it bigger. When an ally betrayed them, they turned the traitor city into a colony. They didn't just conquer, they absorbed. That was their genius. When they took a city, they gave it roads, markets, and law, and slowly their enemies stopped fighting and started imitating them. Still, beneath the triumph, there was always that shadow. The ghost of Remus, the reminder that Rome's strength came from something darker. Fear of weakness. That fear drove them further across rivers, through forest, into wars they didn't need but couldn't avoid. They believed every hardship was a test sent by the gods. If they passed it, they proved their worth. If they failed, they weren't Roman enough. There's an old saying that the Romans didn't build their empire because they wanted to rule the world. They built it because they were afraid of being ruled again. Every victory was a defense against their own past. Generations passed. The city grew. The Republic became proud, and pride invited challenge. When Carthage rose in the west, Rome met it like a mirror. Another power, another destiny. The wars between them were more than military, they were spiritual. Carthage fought for wealth. Rome fought for identity. And when the final war ended, Carthage was ash. Nothing remained but sand and silence. The Roman soldiers salted the earth so nothing could grow there again. To them, it wasn't cruelty, it was closure. Standing in those ashes, one Roman general, Scipio Africanus, wept. He whispered that someday Rome would fall as Carthage had fallen, because every empire carries its own destruction inside it. He was right, but no one wanted to listen. The people celebrated, the Senate cheered, and the fires of Carthage reflected in their eyes like the light of heaven. That victory changed Rome forever. The Republic had won the world, but it began to lose itself. Wealth poured in, slaves, gold, tribute, and with it came greed. The simple farmers who had built the city were replaced by merchants and politicians. The Senate became a theater of egos. The discipline that had once defined Rome started to crack. The people still marched under the same banners, but something in their hearts had shifted. They no longer fought to survive. They fought to expand. Yet even in that corruption, the old spirit never fully died. The Roman legions were still loyal, still ruthless, still guided by the belief that Rome was eternal. And maybe that's why it worked. For centuries, they pushed outward, east, west, north, south, devouring kingdoms, reshaping continents. They said they brought civilization, but civilization was often another word for control. To resist Rome was to disappear. To join Rome was to forget who you once were. But this story isn't about emperors or conquests, it's about that first moment. The spark in the mud by the river. Because every empire before it rises is just a small group of people who refuse to stop. Rome's miracle wasn't its armies, it was its endurance. The ability to take pain and turn it into progress. When I imagine those early Romans, I don't see heroes. I see ordinary people, tired, hungry, stubborn, building something they could never live to see. I see women hauling water, men carving stones, children chasing goats through the dust. I see the kind of quiet courage that doesn't make history books but makes history possible. Maybe that's why Rome's story still pulls us in, because it isn't really about marble or conquest. It's about what happens when humans decide to outlive their fear. They were brutal, yes. They were ruthless. But they were also dreamers, builders of time itself. Walk through the ruins today and you'll feel it. Not glory, but gravity. The weight of centuries pressing down on broken columns. The sense that something huge once breathed here and is still exhaling slowly into the air. It's not pride you feel, it's recognition. Because in their rise and their ruin, we see ourselves. We too build, we too destroy. We too hope that what we build will last longer than we do. Rome's beginning isn't a story about gods or destiny. It's a story about people who refuse to stop moving. About a small village that became an idea so powerful it outlived its founders by millennia. They believed that no setback was final, that no wall was unbreakable, that tomorrow could always be rebuilt. So maybe the question isn't how Rome rose, but why it had to. Maybe the gods never chose them. Maybe they chose themselves. And if that's true, then the empire they built is more than ruins. It's a mirror, a reflection of what we become when ambition outruns fear, when pain becomes purpose, when a village decides to become eternal. Look at that river again, quiet, patient, still moving after 3,000 years. It doesn't shout, it doesn't boast, but it endures. Just like Rome did for a time. Just like we all try to. So ask yourself, was it destiny that built Rome or defiance? What do you believe?